of Ritual and also a mom of three. And I'm just so grateful for everyone joining this incredible conversation on motherhood. Motherhood has, wow, it's been tough in general, and it is tough in general, but this last year, it holds a lot of weight, even more weight. There's a lack of community, lack of information, and emotional support, which is why I think now, 2021, I'm excited more than ever to have this conversation with Erica Chidi, who is a longtime friend of mine, a mentor, the CEO of Loom, the CEO and founder of Loom, an incredible doula, and really an expert in sexual health and wellness and reproductive health. And so I'll let Erica introduce herself, and then we'll dig into a lot of the questions, hundreds of questions that we've gotten from the community for this event. Crazy.
Well, Kat, it's nice to see you from like afar, or like through the mesh of the of the internet. Um, I really always love the conversations we've had over the years, just talking about the body and talking about pregnancy and well-being. In terms of my intro, for those of you who might not know me, I am the co-founder CEO of Loom. I'm a doula health educator and person who has supported people around their sexual and reproductive health experiences for the better part of a decade. Loom is a well-being platform that focuses on empowering women through sexual and reproductive health education. And for some of you who maybe, I think there are a few people on here tonight that are from LA, might have had the opportunity to visit us when we were a brick and mortar space and actually take a physical in-person class. But we're really excited about where we're going and how we're taking the kind of Loom experience, bottling it up and bringing it into the digital space. And so I think it's a really exciting time right now, in the sense of something I've always wanted is to have as many people access the education and curriculum that we've been kind of providing, but on that smaller scale. It's always been a dream to have it go to as many people that need it. And that's what is going to be happening with our kind of new digital platform. And I don't know, Kat, if I should dive in and share more about that now, or if it's better to kind of circle up about that.
Yeah, I think everyone would love to hear more about that and the plans that you guys have. That Loom, being in LA myself, it was such a hub and community for information around motherhood, and so excited that you guys are taking that to the digital realm. So would love to hear more about what you guys have planned for that.
Yeah, so we are going to be launching our private beta in a couple of weeks, and actually everyone who is here is going to get access to that private beta experience. And the two classes that we're launching with, and actually the two subjects that we're launching with, are pregnancy and postpartum. And we're launching with two classes. The first class is 27 to 40 weeks of pregnancy, and then the second class is postpartum, 0 to 4 weeks. And we chose those two kind of swaths of time because we know that it's a really complex, kind of high intensity period where it's like you're just about to do the thing, whether it's for the first or the second time. And then, those first 4 weeks after you give birth, there's just so many things going on and so much rapid adaptation that takes place. And I think, in terms of just the approach of the classes and how they feel and like what we were solving for and what I was solving for when developing the curriculum was that, I think a lot of the pregnancy and postpartum education space really doesn't look at the whole person or the whole woman. It tends to be very baby centric or very kind of focused on how many weeks of pregnancy you are and trying to kind of fill in the blanks that way. And to me, that feels like a very one-dimensional experience. And like over my years of being a doula and coaching, what I would see in my clients and in my students was that they were coming in pregnant or as a new mother or parent, but they would graft their life onto that experience. And so the way that the curriculum is actually designed is it's divided into 8 topics, and the topics range from relationships and sex to work and money to negotiate and advocate. Um, negotiate and advocate even being an interesting topic in the sense that so many women that I would work with over the years would really struggle to have good conversations, effective conversations with their care providers or with their partners or their chosen family around like decisions they wanted to make around the pregnancy or the birth or around choosing to breastfeed or not breastfeed or bottle feed. And so, the approach with the classes and the curriculum is to really see you as a whole person, give you really strategic, evidence-based approaches to like optimize the experience for you to feel like met in your body, for you to be able to like advocate for yourself with others, and really be able to step into the experience from your own unique experience. So this is definitely not a kind of one size fits all design in terms of how we want to educate people. It's really about, we tried as much as we could to make sure that as many people as possible could find something inside of it that would really work for them. And I truly feel like for pregnant people and for new mothers, especially in the first 0 to 4 weeks postpartum, there you actually kind of can't know too much. I think the issue right now is that there's just not enough information, and the information isn't like current enough. And so I think that's what we really worked hard on, is to just think about, okay, what would I want a mom to know? And that's kind of how we designed it. And so super excited about it. Obviously, I could like just keep talking about education like all day, but I really want to get to your questions.
Yep.
But really excited for all of you to, get access to the beta and, drive around, feel it out, and give us feedback about the experience. But really, I think the last thing I'll say is, I really, and our team really built this to support you and to hopefully help you support other people in your life that are going through this experience, especially right now in the pandemic when it's just everything is changing. The hope is that the curriculum helps you feel more anchored amongst all of the big shifts that are happening.
Thanks, Erica. And so I think before we dive into these hundreds of questions we've had, and we're not going to answer all of them, I wanted to say one last thing before we get started. And we're really excited to share the stories and provide educations around these different life stages. And I wanted to remind everyone that this is not meant to recommend, endorse, or associate any specific products, and that our products are not intended to treat, cure, or mitigate any disease. As always, we recommend you check in with your physician for specific questions and guidance. So with that necessary regulation piece, let's just dive in. And I would also encourage everyone to use the chat. I know that this is kind of a new world we're in, but we want to keep it as conversational as possible. So please feel free to use the chat as we're chatting, to follow up on any questions that we can answer later on. So we've kind of broken up the questions and the conversation into a number of stages, with pre-pregnancy being really the first stage that we want to dive into. And we had so many questions around this stage. Personally, I remember just being taught about preventing pregnancy growing up, and then all of a sudden it's time to enter this pre-pregnancy phase, and it's just such a lack of information around how to even conceive and conception in general, and such a confusing time, because there's so many different journeys around that phase for all of us, and some are extremely challenging and hard to find people to even have a conversation around. So as we prepare for conception, maybe Erica, you can walk us through the different topics, different options that we have, whether it's IUI, IVF, ICI. What are some of the journeys, and what do they look like?
Yeah, I think This question is really interesting for me for a number of different reasons, but I really want to, excuse me, I really want to try and normalize the idea of reproductive assisted technologies, which is basically what all of those things are. Uh, Most people know about IUI and IVF. There's also ICI, so I'll just like quickly break down the three, and then can just kind of speak to it from from a couple different positions. So IUI is intrauterine insemination, meaning that washed sperm from a partner or a donor is placed using a catheter into the uterus. So it's going inside of the actual space of the uterus in your body. There's no fertilization taking place with the sperm. It's just washed sperm. And uh, one way that you can kind of think about it is, sperm comes with a bunch of snacks around it to basically help it survive and like make its way when it's, there with through another human being placing themselves inside of your body and releasing the sperm into the vagina, and then it makes its way up with these snacks. When you do IUI, the sperm is washed and all the snacks are kind of taken out in order to make sure that there is just as much possibility to get the sperm kind of where it needs to go. And then there is also ICI, where the washed sperm, again, sperm son snacks, is placed near the cervix. And then there is IVF, which is when the actual fertilization process takes place between the actual process of conception and fertilization takes place outside of the body, and then the fertilized egg is placed inside of the uterus. So those are the kind of three differences in terms of assisted reproductive technology. In terms of
Erica,
the journey,
what's wash sperm? That question came up as you're saying.
basically the actual, so in ejaculant, there are a number of different elements. So there's sperm, there's proteins, there's carbohydrates, there's all these, that's why I call them snacks. I'm so sorry if that was like a odd term that didn't clarify, but basically wash sperm means those things are removed. As much of the kind of non-sperm content is removed in order to optimize the sperm's ability to get where it needs to go, just for clarification.
Cool, thank you.
But yeah, in terms of like the journey to get to those three options, I think interestingly with this question, what's not really talked about, which I think is important to lean into, is deciding to do IUI, IVF, or ICI, any of those technologies, the motivation there is layered, right? Some people, for example, and I always like to give like examples because I think it can provide a little bit of support around how to think about it. It's not every single person that decides to do IVF is someone that's actually having fertility challenges. I've had people in my practice when I was still practicing as a doula do IVF out of like anxiety management. They didn't feel like actually wanting to try. It just felt too stressful to know, is it working or not working? They just wanted to like bypass that entire experience and just get to the thing. And, all their levels are great. Their partner or their donor's levels were great. So I always like to kind of introduce that, just because I think there can be a lot of like complexity around how to look at getting technology as to basically adding technology to your reproductive experience. So that's one way to get there. Another way to get there is after trying, without any assistance for about a year or more, and not seeing, conception take place, and now wanting to move into other options. What I would say there is, if you are, battling with potential fertility challenges, I have like two two, I would say, somewhat controversial opinions, but after working with people for so many years and not being a clinician, but being someone who's supporting on an educational and kind of a self-advocacy and well-being, position, IUI is less expensive, and you can do a number of rounds of IUI, so intrauterine insemination. Oftentimes people do that first just to kind of save the cost and just depending on the reasoning why there are, I'm sorry if can everyone hear me? Thumbs up, Kat, can you hear me? Just the internet went funny, okay.
I can hear
So
you, it was a little blip.
no worries. Depending on the reason behind why there are fertility challenges or conception challenges, it's really important to get very, very clear on that as much as possible before deciding to go the IUI route out of cost savings versus actually going the IVF route, because you have a much higher chance of conceiving using IVF than IUI. And so I think a really rigorous conversation with the care provider is needed, hence this idea of why, like, we built in a negotiate and advocate component to our curriculum. Like, there needs to be a conversation as to like what really is the best option for you outside of just the financial implications. And so I just wanted to introduce that. Again, we're not having only a fertility conversation. So I'm just trying to touch on some of the more outside of the box thinking ways of looking at that experience to maybe hopefully jumpstart, ideas for those who are kind of like thinking about that. So like I said, getting clarity on what's going on in your body and whether or not IUI might be more of a time waste versus going IVF and vice versa. And then, the last thing I'll share is that in terms of conceiving and fertility, another option that is available is, trying without assistance. And really the key thing that you have to keep in mind, if that's something that you're wanting to do, is that it's going to require you to monitor your cycle. Most people, unfortunately, which really troubles me, but it's something that I hope that Loom will be able to help support people around, is that a lot of people only begin tracking their cycle when they are wanting to conceive. And, the only reason why it troubles me is because I think it's a very activating, uncomfortable experience to start to learn very specific, sometimes usually time sensitive goal attached to it. And so I would say for anyone who's thinking about conceiving or is currently like in that realm, and you haven't started tracking it because you're like, I'm just going to start like 6 months before, or I'll start like a year before. Just start tracking like 5 years before. It's just like this, the more you really deeply understand that process, you understand your cycle, it's just going to be, one, more information, two, a very easy, smooth transition into now adding a goal onto a self-evaluation skill you've been learning for years. Because the truth is, it's like there is conscious stress and there is subconscious stress, like stress you can't even really feel or even quantify. And to try and learn how to monitor your cycle, also now be planning for a baby, also looking at your wider ecosystem of your life and your work and all these things. It's like learning how to track your cycle long before trying to conceive is a way to mitigate at least one pillar of stress. Not all of them, but at least one. So that's kind of my piece there.
No,
I'm
that's
just going to
really,
turn on
really
my lights.
Yeah, no worries.
Quickly.
I'm curious if there's any tools that you would recommend for tracking your cycles.
Yeah, there's a couple different things. I think obviously a good period app is great. I'm a big fan of Clue. I've used Clue for many, many, many years. And they don't sell your data, so that's always nice. And then, but here's the thing, and this is something that we built into our classes as well, is, people learn in multiple formats and ways, so in our class we have text, video, audio. When it comes to tracking your cycle and something like Clue is kind of a one-dimensional experience in the sense that it really puts the responsibility on you to like monitor and track your your kind of like bodily functioning. And I'll go into a little bit more detail about what you're looking out for in a second. However, there are other wearables like the Ava, which is the only one I can think of right now, that monitors your basal body temperature. And so you put it on at night, and it will watch for that fluctuation. And the basal body temperature fluctuation is going to be happening pre-ovulatory, post-ovulatory. So before you ovulate, your basal body temperature stays doesn't have a lot of variability, doesn't have a lot of change, pretty insignificant change. And then after you ovulate, your basal body temperature changes pretty significantly, by a couple tenths of a degree, which is significant for the body. And that change is what something like the Ava or a wearable technology device will pick up on to alert you that you are now post-ovulatory. So also important to keep in mind when you are tracking your temperature, that temperature change is what I like to call kind of like a piece of like retrospect data, right? It's like you've already missed the window, it's already happened. It's letting you know that like it's gone, right? And I think that's so important because even just I think culturally when people are like, are you tracking your temperature? It's like, yeah, but it's like the thing that you're looking out for lets you know it's too late. So it's like, it's not really the best. It's like there has to be a multi-pronged approach to conceiving. So that's my two things. Different learning styles. If you feel like just inputting data is a little challenging, having a wearable might be really helpful just to give you like one other way of like bringing in the information. But really what I feel the most passionate about for those who, and I just saw someone say how important it is to track temperature. It is important actually, just to get a full picture. But here's the thing, and this is why I was saying doing it long before is like, you can start to get an understanding of your, like the more data you can get, the less like tracking it becomes important. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like, it just becomes a part of like your practice versus like, I'm now going to really focus on this particular, piece of data within this like equation of things I need to be looking at. So just pulling out of that, coming out of the temperature component, the other things that you're looking for in terms of monitoring your potential fertility or your fertility potential are cervical mucus, which changes throughout the month. And you're also looking for the position of the cervix as well, because actually right before you ovulate, your cervix moves a little higher in the body and gets a little softer as well. And then you are also looking at basal body temperature too. And those are kind of like the three factors that you're looking for. So temperature, cervical mucus, and cervix positioning. Now, the thing here is the cervix positioning and the cervical mucus require, a level of body comfort that may or may not be there for you. And that's not your fault. We really live in a culture, especially here in the States, where there's not a lot of internal reflection on the body, and the body's kind of like a scary place and no one wants to look at their vagina. Well, no one wants to go into their vagina, which is what I wanted to say, and no one really wants to look at their vulva. So just PS, vagina is the whole, vulva is the structures around. So mons, pubis, labia, clitoris, that is vulva. Vagina is whole. So, and even that discrepancy, like most people don't know that, but we all know what a scrotum is and like, testicles and a penis. It's like we have the same type of, layout or lay in, lay flat, whatever. But all that in which to say, nobody is it's really encouraging women to look at those things more closely. So that also is the other thing too, in terms of this prep ahead of time that I think is important. It's like, if someone's like, all right, now it's time to get pregnant, so I want you to start just, putting your fingers in your vagina and like monitoring your temperature and like knowing, it's just like, huh? Like, I haven't done this my whole life. Why do I? And then so for some people who are like super body curious, it's like, I definitely have had the other experience where people like, it's so like cool. I'm like learning about my body and it's really interesting. But that is definitely a small portion of the population, very small. So all of which to say, because I know we're spending quite a bit of time on preconception, is that doing it ahead of time without the, you know, the focus of the goal being so near term, like just starting to make, like if you have people that are younger than you or haven't started thinking about it yet, like the piece of advice with that for them would be like just start tracking now if you think you want to have kids at some point. And then, you know, find a good tracker, like a good app or a wearable, and then also know that the things that you're looking for beyond the temperature are going to be cervical mucus and cervical position. And also locating the cervix position, just for some that have never heard that before, it would require you to place a finger inside of your vagina and locate your cervix. And if you don't know where that is, a great way to figure it out is if there's ever been any type of penetration in your vagina and you felt like, ooh, that penetration's a little too deep, that is your cervix, basically. So your cervix has a ton of nerve endings on it. So anytime it's contacted, there's like, you know, it could be a pleasurable response, but typically it's not as pleasurable when it's not, you know, done in the way that feels comfortable. So that just to give you a guide of like where your cervix is living inside of your vagina.
Yeah, I love that idea of having body literacy pre trying, and just really understanding your body, all of us understanding our bodies, way ahead of that. And I know that we've gone pretty deep in the pre-pregnancy phase.
Sorry, I
No,
always
no,
go
it's
deep.
fine. It's just I've had 3 kids and I'm still so curious, and I feel like illiterate
Well,
in some ways about
jump.
that.
Why don't we jump to pregnancy? Let's get into it because I feel like there are probably quite a few pregnant folks here. No, yes, or
Yeah, can we
how
get
do we know that? Can we get a poll?
can we
Maybe
get
raise your hand if you're pregnant on the Zoom.
I know it's challenging. Oh,
You
okay.
can raise your hand in person and then you can put
Wow.
it on
Yeah,
the.
yeah. I'm seeing the
There we go.
emojis come
All
through.
right.
Amazing.
Let's dive
Congratulations.
in. Congratulations, everybody. Yeah. Okay, let's go.
Wow, it's
Let's do this.
incredible.
Let's go in and get it done.
So
Tell your friends all of that stuff, everyone. Okay, just go
yeah,
back and let them know that other information.
yeah, no, the other information is important
Yeah.
forever. But yeah, I think during pregnancy, one of the biggest things that came up was just like all the changes that happen in your body, getting comfortable or not comfortable with that. How do you alleviate some of that pain and discomfort and kind of just own your pregnancy body?
You know, it's interesting. I think every pregnancy is unique. And, you know, again, I always have to acknowledge like the culture that we live in and how kind of unsupportive it is of this kind of massive change that you go through as a pregnant person. Um, I'm loving seeing how many weeks everybody had. So cool, so great, awesome. Okay, sorry, former doula, can't help it. I just get so giddy and excited. It's great. Okay, so going back to just the embracing of the body and finding comfort when everything feels super uncomfortable. So I want to introduce like maybe a newer concept for people. So there is a type of therapy called occupational therapy. Some of you might have heard of it, OT, right? OT typically has a lot of different applications, but I'm just going to really center it here on pregnancy and on postpartum. You know, there's a lot of new information coming out and research around how pregnancy is an occupation. It's a job, right? It's something new that you're doing that your body is like reorganizing itself to do. And same thing for postpartum. So, you know, in terms of just like a logic set, think about, you know, what would you do if you're going to start a new job? You might like buy new clothes. You might like, you know, come up with like kind of a new routine. It's maybe a different place that you're going to than your old job. Like you might have to go on a new route, like et cetera, right? Like just think about anytime you started a new job, how long it took for you to get comfortable in it, right? And so, you know, it's definitely a helpful framework to put on pregnancy because our
You're
culture.
freezing, froze a little
Oh,
bit. It's
how
fine.
about now?
Good.
Okay, yeah. So I think it's a helpful like framework to put onto the experience of pregnancy in the sense that going back to this culture piece, like we don't really get a lot of good support around like how to take care of ourselves during pregnancy. But if you think about pregnancy as a new job and you think about what you've always done in the past when you've approached a new job or anything kind of new, like even going on a trip, like how do you do a bit of prep before you make some, changes. If you don't like where you're staying, you go try stay somewhere else. Like, you ask for a refund. I'm being very kind of like, silly and like metaphoric right now, but all of that in which to say in terms of like trying to embrace your body and feel comfortable. I really want to encourage whoever asked that question and just, at large, patience is really key. You need time to get comfortable with it. And, the first trimester is always, for a lot of people, the most challenging because your digestion slows down, you're constipated, you're sleepy all the time because progesterone's just like popping off. And, you can't maybe talk to as many people about what's going on yet. So you can't get like the outer support that you need. But, again, there, even in the most challenging components of pregnancy, I like to say that um, there's this like polishing that's happening. It's almost like if you put a stone into like a thing and it's like getting polished. It's like you're being blah, 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 all over the place, like thrown around, but like you're being softened and you're being refined for this like next stage. And so I talk about it in our class when I talk about like the pain or the potential pain of labor. It has a purpose. So it's like all of the discomforts you're going through while you're pregnant have a purpose. Yes, occupational therapists are amazing. We love that. Sorry, just as someone just said that, but I'm
I see
so
that.
pro OT. But to say that, I think it's all about putting the pain and the discomfort in a different framework of, so the first layer I brought to the table is like, this is like a new job. So like, what do you need to do in and around your ecosystem, your environment to support this new occupation that you're stepping into and will be in for, the foreseeable future. And then the second piece being, okay, I'm like, in this new job and like, my body's doing all these things that I don't really feel super comfortable with, but this is to help support my baby. There's a purpose here. And so, if you can kind of change some of the thinking around the discomfort, you can change how you feel about it. And also, I think the last thing to add in is like pregnancy is temporary. It's really not forever. And so I think sometimes, especially for clients over the years that I worked with that really were struggling with just, whether it's, anxiety, depression, actual physical pain in the body, sciatica, or just body dysmorphia or, disordered eating, things like that. Sometimes we just took it one little step at a time. We just were like day by day. We just got to stick with it that way. And then for some people, another, solve was like not thinking about it day by day, just going really big picture to stay focused and just get out of like, okay, this really feels hard right now. I have to go big and think about what happens after the baby's here to find some sanity and to find some comfort. So again,
Sanity is a key word. I think, and
I
it
mean,
came up a lot. I mean, especially right now, just staying sane through everything that's going on as
totally.
a pregnant person or trying to conceive, not having the community to talk to about a lot of these things right now. I think makes it extremely hard. And that actually a lot of the questions were about this kind of anxiety. I think people are feeling that more than ever. With their pregnancy, probably thinking about what their birth is going to be like during this time,
Totally.
and like what and how that might their plan. I'm sure a lot of us on this Zoom are thinking about that, and our plans have changed or there might be different. Like how do you think about how to prepare for labor right now? Like how has that shifted? What are like the different paths there right now? And then also as a doula, like what role does a doula play, and what role can a doula play in that journey?
Yeah, so I think right now, in terms of preparing for labor, there are a lot of unknowns, being inside of the pandemic and not knowing, you know, where things are going to be 3 months or 6 months from now. So I just want to acknowledge the intensity of the time that we're in, and that probably very few of you, you know, when you imagined being pregnant, thought you would be pregnant in this ecosystem. And so I think it's so important to just like take a beat and just like send yourself some gentleness and some compassion for like, I didn't know it was going to be like this. And even for providers that are supporting you, they're also like, didn't know I was going to be doing this. And so
Mhm.
I think understanding that everybody is approaching this moment and this experience from a place of no one was prepared, I think is really important, to just remember and acknowledge everyone's humanity around this. So I say that because the preparation process to get ready for labor or to even be in labor in whatever environment, you know, I always, and my team is like so used to me doing this all the time, but I'm always thinking, okay, don't forget the larger ecosystem and don't forget how it can impact you. And not from like a frightening perspective, but more so some of the care that you might be getting, you know, your provider might be trying to do their best, but like they're under their own duress at the same time. And so I think really the change that I've seen is that really getting more education is going to actually be really important, because having a deeper understanding of the experience is going to help you be able to make the best decisions if you need to do quick pivots, which is also seems to be a big part of the experience right now. And also for a lot of people that have partners that are pregnant, you know, partners not being able to go into all the
Mhm.
appointments, they're having to do like your partner's in the car, like virtually listening in, you're in the appointment, you know. So I think really getting education around so just to back up a little bit, so the one thing, just the gentleness and like the compassion for each other, both yourself and your partner chosen family and your care provider, for how challenging this time is. One, two, getting really good education and information about wherever you're going to be birthing, understanding like, you know, what are the different scenarios, what if there are no beds, you know, what's the plan there. You know, some of you might have even talked to your provider. This is, I would say, actually, so about 2016, there was a study done called the Arrive study that talks about how women that were induced at 39 weeks um, did not have an increased risk of cesarean birth or their child being transferred to NICU. And so what I've seen a lot of actually as a result of the pandemic is that a lot of providers are being a little bit more upfront about being induced in order to make sure that you can have a bed. There's some other protocols that can be set up to just create some consistency around the birthing experience. And so I think just given how short our time is together tonight, I just wanted to highlight that, because there's a lot of fear around being induced. That if you start that, it creates this whole cascade of interventions, which can be true. However, the study that was done, and also more importantly, having a very clear communication with your care provider about if the plan is to explore an induction or move forward with that, what can you do leading up to that to put you in the best possible position. And so I just wanted to put that out there as like, how have I seen labor change? Like inductions are definitely on the rise. And I do think that the kind of mental headspace you bring to an induction is actually really important. If you're going into induction feeling fearful that your birth is going to end in a cesarean birth, like that's actually going to impact your experience, because you're going in stressed, you're going in this kind of more defensive kind of posture about the experience, versus, you know, getting more education around how a vaginal birth can happen as a result of an induction, I think is going to be helpful in a pandemic, in this time that we're in. Pre-pandemic, I would not be like honking my horn super loud about an induction. I would say, okay, if you definitely want one, let's explore what that could look like. But I think now understanding the framework of induction is really key, because it's just coming up a lot more. And then I think, you know, in terms of how a doula can support, sorry, I'm going quickly just to try
Yeah.
and make sure we can get to some more questions. Um, in terms of how a doula can be involved, I think a doula's job right now, and I was having a conversation with another doula recently about this, is, you know, our job, if I was still working in the field, would be to prepare you so well that you don't need us, because that is also going to have a lot of variability depending on where you live in the country, whether you can have someone present at your birth. And so, if you are working with a doula and they're saying to you, like, I'm going to be there, I'm going to do my best to be there, I really would push back on that and ask them to like really train you, educate you, support you, as if they will not, because that's really when you're going to have like the most resources between you and your partner, if you're single, your chosen family, what have you, to be able to do it well. And so I think that's a really important thing. And then for doulas, if they can't be there, another great opportunity is to just have them support you virtually, which I had my last clients before I retired. They delivered in February of last year, and I supported them virtually. And it actually is a really great tool. I think, even outside of the pandemic, I think this is really great if you're a private person and don't want anyone else there at your birth. I think this new thing that's had to happen as a result of the pandemic is supportive in that, if you work with a doula virtually, you can call them, ask them questions, you can put them on FaceTime, show them what's going on. And I think, in a hospital, to have an extra lifeline like that of someone who has followed and accompanied you on your pregnancy, it's a way to continue that idea of continuous support without having to have someone actually in the room. So I think that's how doulas can really show up right now, and it actually still is really helpful. And yeah, so that's kind of like my feeling labor wise in terms of right now.
Yeah, that's super helpful. I gave birth during this pandemic, and it was not what I expected. And I don't think I expected to have to choose one person to stay or see one person the whole time during labor and delivery, and having to choose that support system, I think is a whole other thing. And I my heart goes out to all the moms or the future moms and moms that are on this call and having to labor during this time. It's definitely
Totally.
it's emotional and challenging. So I think we should move into postpartum, just because we have about 12 minutes left, and I want to get to a lot of the questions that were asked in the chat as well. So I think, as a mom of three, I think the first birth, I definitely didn't prioritize my own health and wellness. 6 months postpartum, the more kids I had, it was more challenging because I have all these, children running around and I have to take care of them as well. What's the best advice for these 6 weeks, 6 weeks postpartum? Really crucial timing for us to kind of take care of our own well-being. And how do you do that when you have so much else that's going on?
I'm glad you started off by saying when you have so much else going on. I also just want to like deep bow, salute you, mom of 3, birthing your third in a pandemic, running a startup. Like, how I feel about you. Because that's just like, to me, is like witchcraft. It's just like, how are you doing this? But, I'm sure many of you came across the New York Times piece about motherhood, moms being in crisis right now with the pandemic and all of that. So I think, again, this is not an answer, but I just feel like it's important to just acknowledge that birthing a baby right now and parenting right now also doesn't look the way we would have hoped. Like having support at home, all of these things, maybe you can't have parents come stay because they haven't been vaccinated. There's just like a whole new litany of concerns and challenges that, when you thought you would be pregnant, you did not think you were going to have to deal with, or when you thought you're going to have a baby, etc. So again, just like a pause and some breath and some gentleness and some grieving, some sadness around just like, oof, like, okay, like that's not what I thought. Make some space for that feeling, and then, move on to thinking about how to take care of yourself. I would say that it's going to be really important to try and have some kind of plan. I think the whole idea of like, we're just going to wing it and like see what happens, like that is just dangerous. Like in general, we don't want to recommend that. Like a plan will be helpful, even with taking care of a baby. Like babies can't tell time, but what they can tell and start to build some type of predictability around is like rhythms and routines. Like you like picking them up kind of the same way, and changing them, swaddling them, rocking them, feeding them. Like that's what the babies start to get into, early on. They're not adults. They don't need like free time to like hang out and do other things and just like, let's see what the baby wants to do today. It's like, no, no, no. That's not the vibe. The vibe is baby needs to just be in a flow that you set up where you kind of do the same things all the time. And that rhythmicity that you give to the baby actually also gives you some rhythmicity, which is helpful in those first couple of weeks. So that's really like my top recommendation, is to get into that flow. When very little is in any real control, that is something that you can start to to manage. And I talk about that at length in our postpartum class. But then going back to just thinking around what can you do for yourself. So in a conversation I had with a friend recently, we talked a lot about, she brought up this kind of like old midwife's approach to after you have a baby. And the idea is like, 5 days in the bed, like you're in the bed, that's basically where you are, 5 days around the bed. So you're just kind of like, toddling around it. And then like, 5 days in the house, like 5 days in the room. Sorry, it's 5 5 5. So 5 days in the bed, 5 days around the bed, 5 days in that room, 5 days in the house, and then like then you go for like a walk.
It sounds like
you know
that.
What I mean?
The expiration of milk as well. It's like 5
Correct.
hours outside, 5 hours in the fridge, 5 days in the fridge,
Yeah.
5 months in the freezer, whatever. Yeah,
Exactly.
It's easier to remember the stuff. One thing that I did this time that was different than my other two was I knew that I would have like no time for like cooking and so I actually weeks before froze a bunch of like amazing, like my favorite meals, and I did not share them with the rest of my family, and they were like my comfort food, and I felt incredibly selfish. My husband really wanted some of my macrobiotic bowls and all of that, but I had that in my back pocket because I think you just get so hungry, you're so like delirious in a lot of ways when that baby is born, and there's so much attention on the baby and not as much on your own health and recovery. And I remember just feeling like just eating like my favorite foods and nourishing foods and having that already ready where I didn't have to think about it. Felt incredibly great and selfish at the same time.
Totally. I think prepping food ahead of time is so key. And, and that's something too that you can get people in your life that love you to do for you as well. I think we always forget how much people that care about us want to be useful. And I think in the pandemic, when it's not like come over and hang out, it might be like, hey, like I really want this, like, porridge, or I want this, like, lasagna or sheet pan thing or whatever. You can really put your community to work to like make you frozen things that you can just start to bring over. And again, it's like what Kat's talking about, what I'm talking about, those are all plans. That's a process. That's like you're creating some type of framework to put people, to work. And if you're the kind of person who, likes to stay busy and that helps you feel relaxed, like putting together a plan postpartum is a great way to like use some of that energy. And again, at the same time, knowing that having access to help and support might be harder. I really think that learning how to wear your baby is going to be really important, whether using a structured carrier or soft carrier. Sorry if my connection's unstable. But I love getting parents into baby wearing almost immediately, because you can have your baby on and you can be like peeing, love a pee with the baby wrapped on you, poo, whatever. Your partner can do it too, or whomever your support system looks like. You can take a call. Like it's just, because let me tell you something.
I love baby wearing. Baby wearing is amazing.
It.
Yeah, I love it.
And also, I just talked about like all of like the productivity benefits, but honestly, from like a bonding and connection benefit, you and your baby just get all these like juicy, yummy, like, hormones that get to happen in that exchange through, through baby wearing in those first few weeks. And so I would say, like, pregnancy, a great thing to do would be to start like learning how to baby wear, like take a digital baby wearing class with like all these different people that offer that. There's lots of doulas that do that. Like, that would be a great skill to learn and for your partner to learn, so that you can just like get into it kind of like day one.
Yeah,
And then
because
the
these
other
things
thing,
are not, they're not intuitive. I mean, I remember being
no,
incredibly stressed out to
no,
figure out even like the simplest carrier. Crazy.
they are not intuitive. The only other thing too I would mention as well is like, and this is, I'm glad that this is popping in, because I think it's not discussed enough. So, while you're pregnant, your baby is just going like gun gada gun gada gun gada gun in your body all day. Even while you're sitting still right now, your diaphragm in your chest is moving up and down and just like gently jostling your baby. So like the takeaway there is your baby is moving 24 hours a day. Then they come out of their little hot tub, and it's like, well, you just like, I'm pushing your back and you're just, that's it, right? You're just gonna like go to sleep. It's like, no, they came from a completely different watery, like jump environment, and now they're just hanging out, standing still. It's not right for them, basically, is to put it simply. And so this idea of like, am I holding my baby too much? Do I spoil my baby if I wear my baby like 4 or 5 or 6 hours out of the day? No, like basically that first 4 weeks of after birth is all about helping the baby acclimate to this new environment, which means doing the best we can to kind of re-architect the uterus or womb in the world. So that's like baby wearing, that's like swaddling. Like, swaddling is not a torture chamber for babies. They actually like being compact. It's like proprioceptive input for them, meaning feeling where your body is in space through your muscles and joints. Like they enjoy that compact feeling. And constant movement is great for them as well. So I say that because a lot of times there can be a lot of like different advice of just like, no, just let your baby cry, or just like, don't rock your baby too much. No, like a very consistent moving environment, and like constriction, but gentle constriction, that input, swaddling, white noise, all of that is going to be really helpful and supportive for the baby. And when I say white noise, it can also be you singing to your baby, playing similar music that you play when you're pregnant. They can hear things, obviously, as we all know, during pregnancy. So I think the biggest takeaways, just in general, just speaking to postpartum, one is really making sure that you do that plan ahead of time, and like get the food together, get family members or friends to make you things to freeze. Like, figuring out how to baby wear prenatally is going to be super helpful. I'll add in one extra thing actually during pregnancy, is that it's probably a very, very good idea to learn about sleep now. Understand what sleep is for a newborn. Learn about sleep today, not when you're trying to
You got
figure it
me hooked
out.
on the Happy Sleeper, and I would literally read that
Yeah,
book. I would read that book on my phone,
yeah, totally.
as I was falling asleep at night, and it's totally changed. Great, great team over there, and just amazing resource for getting
Totally.
sleep, because sleep becomes everything. You think,
Sleep sleep hygiene
yeah.
is super important. And going back to mental health stuff for a moment, just bouncing around a little bit, learning about sleep prenatally. It's The Happy Sleeper is a book, Brooke, that she just asked. The Happy Sleeper. I don't know if Claire or Michaela, if you could Google and maybe just throw it into the chat.
Yeah.
It's by Heather
There.
Sturgeon, I think. The only other thing to add there is that sleep hygiene is super important. If you're someone who has always needed good sleep to function, that's not going to change after you have the baby. In fact, it's going to be even more of an acute need. And so if you have a history of depression, anxiety, like OCD, mental illness, any kind of like mental health issues, and you are in some kind of partnership, or you're going to have support afterwards, you really need to be thinking prenatally around, how do I get sleep? Like, how are we going to figure that out? Because as soon as it starts to go, everything unravels. And it's the same thing with food, because when you are no longer pregnant, you're now insulin sensitive again, meaning that when you're pregnant, your sugar doesn't spike as much. So you can be like, I'm not eating as much as I used to, or your hunger triggers aren't the same. But as soon as you have your baby, that just goes back. So you get hangry all of a sudden and you're not sleeping, that combo is not good. So really making a plan around how do we figure out sleep, and then also for you as the mom or or the pregnant person or parent or new parent, and then learning about sleep for newborns prenatally are great ways to spend your time. And most people do not do that. And then you have the baby and there's no time to read. You haven't thought about sleep and then you're just spiraling. And so much of the chaos that we have talked about, heard about from people postpartum is because there's not a rigorous exploration of the experience and how can I make this better for myself. And so I'm hopeful like this conversation is just like planting a bunch of seeds, and helping everyone think about, okay, like I have some time. Lots of a lot of book recommendations.
You're actually an author.
Well,
Why don't you tell us about your book?
yeah, I wrote a book called Nurture, which goes over quite a bit of this, but to be honest, and not to overplug our class, but you know, the beta that you now are all going to have access to has book recommendations. Also, everything that I've said, especially if you're like, whoa, that was so much information, it's all in the class in like exhaustive detail.
It's not enough
So
information. I feel like we could keep talking for an hour and then I have to go
but
feed my kids because they're yelling in the
yes,
background
please
soon.
go feed your
Not yet,
kids.
but soon. I think there's just like there's so many questions in the chat. I think one is that keeps coming up is how do you find resources, queer component, doulas, midwives in LA, but let's talk about it more broadly. Like how do you find how do you
Yeah,
find people like yourself that are amazing and have people have
let me
access
dig
to?
let me dig up my phone really quickly because I'm just going to pull this up because I actually can't recall this from memory. 1 second. This is what's kind of cool about the
Like
Zoom
everyone wants you to
pandemic
keep
energy.
talking. I feel like we could go on for a couple hours and my family can starve.
Let me give me 1 second here. So sorry. It's really just to pull up this resource because I can't think of it off the top of my head. I did give me 2 more seconds, folks, because it's so annoying. I can't think of it.
That's
But
fine.
basically, there's a really amazing queer competent education company. It starts with an M. Maybe we can, I don't know, maybe we can put a tiny list of resources together that goes out with this email
That would
off the
be,
back with that.
yeah, that would be great.
Yeah,
We'll,
let's do
we'll,
that. Let's do
we'll
that because then
answer some
I'll,
of these questions and send out an email if everyone's cool with that. There's
yeah.
one more question I think we can answer, and then I think we'll have to wrap it up. So one question that came up a lot was just this idea of loss. I know that came up, loss pre-pregnancy, but then there's also this feeling of loss after you've had a child, and like how do you hang on to your own identity before motherhood, and then also just embracing your new identity as a mom. I can relate to that. Have definitely felt a lot of loss through different stages. Is that something that you guys cover in with Loom as well?
Absolutely. I mean, that's actually, you know, if I'm like, what's the jam? Like, what's the real like vibe with our class? It's like, it's that. It's really looking at the grief of just like, I'm I'm a mother now, or I'm a parent now, and you know, I can't go to bed whenever I want. I can't just watch TV till I'm blue in the face or read forever without knowing the next. It's like that's what I've been kind of highlighting in this entire conversation is just acknowledging grief, like for at all of these different phases, whether it's the grief of the moment we're in right now, the pandemic, or you know, the big change that's going to come, or like for some of you that aren't going to get to have, if it was important to you, like a shower the way that you thought you were going to. There's all of these pieces that make up who we are, and I think that's really something we built into the education experience, is to give you the opportunity to kind of track your own experience, and meet a lot of these different emotions like loss or anxiety or excitement, like all those things live together. There's actually a module where I talk about fear and ambivalence, and and the fact that you kind of like jumble between the two, just feeling like not really much of anything, or like holding like two very different emotions, or just being really scared. And that is actually so normal. But again, we're just not talking about it. And I'm glad that that question came up around loss, because that is also a very normal feeling that we don't talk about. And so it's important to just know that all feelings are welcome. That said, going back to the mental health piece for a moment, if you are really feeling, consistently not well and really feeling super anxious, depressed, if you have had OCD or you feel like you're having a lot of repetitive or compulsive behaviors, it is going to be really important to try and talk to someone about it, and to get some help and to get some intervention there. And that's really something we talk about in the class with actually Dr. Alexander Sachs, who's an amazing reproductive psychiatrist. We talk about mental health, concerns and issues that come up prenatally and then also postpartum. And we really talk about what a family plan looks like to manage that. Like, how can partners or chosen family members be able to, get in there and, get, permission from you. So great example. And maybe a great way to kind of like wrap things up. If you have a history of, mental health challenges, it would be a great idea to, if you have a psychiatrist, to get HIPAA clearance, to get compliance, to make sure that if you're married, it's probably already set that they have access to some of your health information, but being very, very, very clear with the care provider that my partner is allowed to know like everything that's going on within a certain purview postpartum if I need help, so that they can talk to your care provider without there being any like, issues around that. Because sometimes when you're in the hole, to try and set that up can be really challenging. So that's something to keep in mind. And actually pre-pandemic, I would always recommend for anyone that's had depression or anxiety to actually have their medication, if they had weaned off of it to get pregnant or were no longer taking it during their pregnancy, to have it available already filled at home in case things start to come up. And we want to really just reduce that delta between like calling, reporting the symptoms, going to get the script, you know what I mean? We want to just try and cut down the distance between you and your intervention. So if we can do that by having that med available already there at home, great. And then if we can talk to care providers prenatally to say, look, I'm a little worried about what it could look like. How can my partner be involved if I need help and I can't help myself, especially now, because, you're home a lot and it's not as easy to get that outside support. So those are kind of my thoughts there.
That's awesome. I think everyone, as this comment's saying, that everyone's just soaking up the wisdom. I think it's just important to be prepared is what the takeaway before, during, after, doing as
Totally.
much education as we can about our bodies and then what's to come. And I'm so excited for Loom and the beta and then eventually the launch. I was telling you, Erica, before, I'm like, man, I wish I had this. Like, this is what I needed the last 3 times. And I'm just excited to be part of it, just to learn more about my own body and maybe future pregnancies, who knows? Although I'm not sure. I'm not sure I can do anymore.
If anybody could do it, you could. And I also would just want to say before we pop off, just for everyone to just really be as gentle on yourself as you can and just take it chunk by chunk if that feels good for you. And for those who need to like really go deep and wide and like info mine and, then info dump, go big, like just do whatever your coping mechanism is to help you get a better understanding of what you need. And, and know that this is a moment, not only in reference to the pregnancy, but like what we're in right now, and that it is going to get, it's going to get clearer. It's not necessarily going to get better, but you will adapt and you'll have a better understanding. And that's actually going to be, that's really what I'm excited about, is just the more clarity, more understanding, and then being able to create frameworks around that are supportive.
Yeah, it's not necessarily going to get easier, but there will be more clarity, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, thank you all for joining us this evening. I know it's also a really challenging time for those of us that have kids, and hopefully,
Please go.
hopefully it was really helpful for all stages, and I know that everyone's excited to see the recording as well of this, and for us to share the referral code for Loom. Thanks, Erica. I'm sure I'll be seeing you soon, maybe next week. Love you.
Hope. Love you too. Bye,
Bye,
ladies,
guys.
people. Thank you. Bye.